What up, and welcome back to another Malazan Book of the Fallen video. This time we're covering chapters 19 and 20 of Deadhouse Gates. They're some of my favorite chapters of the book, and actually some of my favorite chapters of the entire series, so I'm excited for this one. Let's get into it. I know Deadhouse Gates gets a lot of hate or, isn't the most well-loved of the whole series. But for me, man, this one had action. It hit me in the feels, and it was just a really exciting set of chapters to reread that I just got a lot out of. So as usual, we're going to do the regular chapter stuff first, and then I'll let you know when to get out because I want to talk about all the spoilery deliciousness that was in here too. We pick up on chapter 19 with Diker, who's a little downtrodden. He's kind of tallying all of the losses from the latest, incredible feat they had of that Vathar crossing and losing Sormo and all of that stuff. And then he also is with List, who is having all these visions of Jagat, and they're finding all these dead Talon Iamass who are ultimately pursuing these Jagat to extinction, and so they're finding this trail of casualties along the way.
I don't like learning things that make me sad.
Lull and Diker kind of have a bit of a conversation about just how do you keep going on, and Diker talks about sleight of hand and just kind of looking at those small moments or finding ways to basically just convince yourself to keep going, or that things are going your way, or to find some kind of hope. No plot significance there, but that's what all of these chapters are layered with, is just that kind of emotional connective tissue that with very little dialogue and internal monologue, you kind of get a sense of who people like Lull are, right? And so again, just the idea of character work, not through all the stuff that we learn about Lull through his talking or stuff, but more just through his deeds and the type of person that he was. Then they ultimately find what's left of the sappers and have just the most hilarious interaction. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole book. They bring him in and he wants to reward him, right? Well, first he tells them look, you guys have been inducted into these Wiccan clans. They want to adopt you because you guys have hooked it up so much along the way. And the sappers all just scowl and stare. Coltane thinks they're offended or something. He goes, look, I already told them you wouldn't be down for that. Which totally isn't true, right? They're deeply humbled and whatever, but just don't, express it in words. They're just, very speak softly and carry a big stick kind of people. But what he does do is try to reward him with rank in the army. And so he takes the leader Mincer and tries to promote him up to the rank of sergeant. But the dude was already a captain.
It was awkward for sure.
And then instead of admitting defeat or whatever, he just kind of rolls with it and promotes the second in command, Bungle, up to captain or sergeant, and then makes the old captain, Mincer, be hurt number 2. And so it was just this whole hilarious thing with the trying to reward screwing it up, but they actually appreciated it, and it kind of goes along with this whole theme of people being demoted down. Whiskey Jack has been demoted down. Gessler got demoted down a few chapters ago, or we find out that he was a demoted down person, and no one wants to raise back up. They're always cool with getting demoted. It's a badge of honor. We do learn a little bit more about that dude Mincer, who just ends up being a total badass. I want a Mincer side series, because the reason the dude was skipping all the meetings this whole time was just straight up so he could sleep. He sleeps while he's walking. He sleeps everywhere. He doesn't care. Always down to sleep. And he also carries a big old bag of rocks that he uses, so that when all of his munitions are gone, weapons are gone, whatever, he just straight up resorts to chucking rocks and actually messing people up with them. Freaking shout out to Mincer. The one thing though that he can't hit is Roach.
You can't touch this.
We also get a lot of world building that happens in these chapters as well, because as they're traveling through the Vathar forest, they're finding all these ancient Jagat towers, basically, where the Jagat lived and then were besieged for like centuries and centuries by the Talon Iamas, and that's why there's all these dead Iamas out there, and then eventually like retreat back to the next tower. And so they're kind of like progressing along this path of all these towers, and it's super sad. And you see, I think a lot of what it's supposed to do is show you the parallels between that and the current world, right? Because you have the mother of these Jagat getting attacked, and then the family coming in to defend, and, you know, falling back over time and eventually dying in this war, and all you have left is kind of like the dead bodies on both sides. And then this piece wraps up with them seeing the whirlwind that Felison ignited at the end of the last chapter, basically shooting up into the air, and Diker knowing right away that that is the whirlwind goddess being reborn. Then we go over to Callum, and he is still on the boat, and something just still doesn't seem right. Time is passing all weird. They still have that boat trailing him, and so even though a different boat, but they still have a boat trailing him, and even though the treasurer guy is gone, who was like trying to sabotage the goods and all of that stuff, all this weird stuff is still going on. He thinks it's Saul Keelan, but he's just not sure. There's like trade winds again where there shouldn't be, and so he's still just really discombobulated. And so Callum's so tripped out that he basically uses his shaved knuckle in the hole early and calls in Quick Ben, who tells him, dude, you're an idiot. You're screwed now when you get to the palace. I'm not going to be able to help you. But they think someone is still essentially trying to jack the treasure. And then, you know, they have a little bit of a chat. He fills him in on everything that's happening on the chain of dogs that he learned from the crew of the ship when he first got on, and the guy thought he wasn't one of the nobles and was there to repair the ship. He tells him that Fiddler separated from him and is going to go through Tremorlor to try and get back to the capital. But Quick is basically like, yeah, you guys totally screwed up, because they connect the dots that, like, yo, they're going to be running straight along the path of hands, which we know that's what they've been doing, going through Tremorlor. And then he's like, you idiot. And then he has to go.
Oops, my bad.
We also find out, too, that the ship is being blown not to Unta, but these trade winds are pushing them towards Malaz City. Then we jump back over to Tremorlor, and Mappo basically thinks that the Nameless Ones he's convinced, right, that what they've tried to do is to herd them there this whole time to Tremorlor to basically feed Ikarium to the Azath and kind of solve this problem that they've had to put Guardians on and keep them from blowing up the world the whole time. He decides, like, look, I'm not going to let Tremorlor have him. I'm not giving up this friendship. Right as he's thinking this, Fiddler starts thinking out loud, like, man, it would really suck to be imprisoned here for all this time. And Mappo totally thinks it's like a jibe at him for considering feeding his friend to the Azath. And he's like, gets all butthurt. And Fiddler's like, whoa, you dick. He's like, I could get imprisoned here way easier than you. You got that gnarly bag and club and crazy Jag, you know, buddy here who can destroy the world. And he's like, you know what, you're right. He's like, I got your back. He's like, you're my homie, and if it comes down to it, I'll defend you too. And we also get to see just like a lot of juicy chunks of pus, like deranged external monologue, in the way that he just like manipulates people that way through seemingly, you know, crazy babble. Yeah, love that.
Why are you saying this stuff?
We also get to see just like a ton of compassion and empathy on display, because Fiddler essentially knows that Ikarium wants the Hounds or Tremorlor or whatever to get him, because he doesn't want to jeopardize the world, and he just sees how bad that crushes Mappo, who has been just like so conflicted between his mission and his friendship, and seeing kind of Ikarium just kind of a seed to, you know, being taken out. Fiddler knows that they would all do, you know, whatever it takes to protect him, just because he's such a good dude, and how they're just not going to let that happen. The Soul Taken Endeavors are just going absolutely ham all around him at this time, and they're about to get completely effed when, a big Soul Taken Endeavors is coming out, and what pops around the corner is Crocus's Uncle Mamat's little Bauchelain, Moby. Who's a good boy? Throughout the course of the plot progression, we also get more world building too, because nobody knows what's up with the Azath, where they came from, what they want. They rush towards it to kind of like take refuge in it. Mappa wants to know more about this shell, right? Because apparently Kimlock is a big deal out there, and Mappa knows who he was, and he also could like kind of sniff out what the shell was actually doing, and he says it was specifically designed for that purpose, to take out the Soul Taken Endeavors, protect Tremorlor as well, save Fiddler and all of his homies' butts, but also it was aspected, whatever that means. And right then a pack of like Deavers Denrabi come around the corner and are going to take him out, but that's when the Hounds of Shadow straight up clock in for the second shift and start putting in work, and that buys them the time they need to actually get to the front door of Tremorlor, where Sari gets up there, tries the door, and it won't open. Then we go back over to the Chain of Dogs, and we keep passing more Jagat tombs from List's like spirit guide, right? And they come to one that's one of the kids who was like smashed in the face with rocks, and then to kill him, they basically trapped him under a giant boulder for eternity. And it's just creating a lot of negative vibes and spirits, and it's really infecting the army, and so it's just really important that they get through there quickly. And there's just like a lot of philosophical ramblings, for lack of a better word, just on the nature of conflict and futility, and really poignant reading for today's world, in my opinion.
Hey, Old Man River, zip it or I'll break your hip.
And again, just more good backstory on the Jagat IMAS kind of conflict, right? Because the IMAS were like an up-and-coming race, and the Jagat just like ignored them, right? They had so much power and they were just more into their own thing and sequestered away, and that like stung their egos, I think, the IMAS, and so they wanted to be like, hey, you can't just ignore us, and did some attacks and got wiped out and whatever. The Jagat weren't into direct conflicts, and so a lot of times they would just like create these like ice fields or glacier fields that would like make it unsustainable for life, and then therefore these IMAS couldn't attack them. And so the whole nature of this ritual that they did to become these kind of undead soldiers that we know from the books was essentially to circumvent that, so that they could turn to dust and travel across glacier fields, so that they could be undead and not need wild game to have to hunt and all of that stuff, so that they could kind of wage this endless war against the Jagat until they were all exterminated.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
But in terms of the army itself, right, they're just absolutely haggard after that march from the Vathar crossing through the forest, and again, just all the spirits infecting them and stuff. So they have like no food, no water. They've taken down their animal supplies to nothing. They're being harried like crazy on the sides from Korbal Dam. Well, in the rear by Korbal Dam, and then on the sides by the Semk and the Tithsani. They're being herded through this valley. They come to the opening, the mouth of the valley, I guess, and there's 3 tribes waiting for them on that side. 2 are together. One is the Kundral, and they're standing off to one side. But basically, the army's on its last legs, right? People are dying of thirst. They're dying of starvation. And right at the last moment, we see this carriage, the Trigal Trade Guild, show up, and they have food, water, supplies for the army, and the special container that Quick Ben made for Coltane. And actually, the Trigal is just like a super cool delivery company. I think they'd make their own like awesome side story, just because they could go around delivering stuff and you get to see all these different parts of the world. Totally a tangent, but Dujek sent this trade guild to give Coltane supplies because he says that the Empire needs commanders like him, and that they found out through Callum and Quick Ben discussing, and Quick Ben went back and told Dujek, and Dujek kind of organized this delivery with all these shareholders, and just, it's a cooperative and very cool company. But there's obviously something going on with Dujek because Dujak's supposed to be outlawed, right? And so he says never underestimate the Empress, and Diker is essentially able to work out that this whole thing with Dujek being outlawed is actually a sham to enable them to take on their real enemy. But then we get to the best part of chapter 19, and that's when the Kundril come up to Coltane right before the battle and just say, look, we have waited for this for so long. Like, we're so eager to take you down and to witness what's about to go down, because you're about to see who the most powerful tribe is in all of this. And then they bail out. But instead of taking on the Wiccans, they turn on Korbolodom, the Semk, and all of the tribes, the Seven Cities tribal people that had been with the army the whole time. And they don't beat Dom, but they totally wipe out all of the other tribes that exist out there. And they were just won over by Coltane, by his sacrifice. They could see that he was doing this thankless job where he wasn't, protecting all these ungrateful, noble refugees, where he's, dealing with renegade commanders who turned on him and went rogue and betrayed him, where his own command structure has left him for dead, and yet he perseveres and has, upset the odds at every turn, and so they just, he got to them, his dignity, his nobility, his sacrifice, and then, they come up at the end of the battle and just get one of my favorite scenes of the book, where you have this like lone Kundril chief who comes back up, and he's like battered and bloodied, and he asks, look, who did you see who was the greatest tribe out there today? And he goes, yeah, I saw. It was the Kundril. Good job. And he goes, nah, it wasn't the Kundril. And he goes, what, you think Korbolodom is the jam? And the guy goes, no, you idiot. It was the Wiccans. And just that scene hits me hard because they got it.
You complete me. I love you.
Then we get to chapter 20, back on the boat, where Salkalan basically goes up to Callum and goes, look, I know what you're up to. Let me work with you to help kill Lysine. And Callum tries to front like, look, that's not my plan, bro. And then with Fiddler and company back at Tremorlor, the door is just like not opening for anyone. In Tremorlor, like the door is just not opening for anyone. The house tries to take this giant swarm of Deavers and Hounds. Ikariam wakes up and starts screaming and freaking out. The Hounds like circle up on him and they're going to try and deal with them. But then the Azath tries to take the Hounds of Shadow and they totally freak out. Fiddler starts laughing because like the Azath is double-crossed Shadow Throne. But right as like basically everything is about to be game over, Moby rolls up and is able to get him into the Azath house.
Wow, what does that mean?
On the inside, Pust is like gushing over the Hounds and how even though the Azath tried to take him, they still stayed on side and completed the mission or whatever. They find the bones of this Forkral Assail, which apparently is like this other like many-jointed elder race that we didn't know about, I think, up till this point. Let me know down below if we've found the Assail before this or heard reference to him. And then outside the Azath, we see that this Trigel Trade Guild shows up again, the carriage, and Fiddler gets a resupply of straight up cussers from Quick Ben. So again, Quick Ben knew he was going to be at Tremorlor and sent this little side delivery of cussers, and it was all of the cussers that they had buried under the street back in Gardens of the Moon when they were originally trying to blow up Darujistan. And so he recovered all of those and got them back to Fiddler. And ultimately what we find out is that Tremorlor really needed a new guardian, kind of like how Raced was the guardian of that new Azath house in Darujistan. This Forkral Assail person was the old guardian and they were dead. And so Tremorlor kind of let this whole false path of hands play out to kind of almost have like a Highlander type of tournament style battle to get to the strongest one, and Moby was like the most badass of all the Soul Taken Endeavors and becomes the new kind of like guardian of Tremorlor. They do find Desem's daughter inside the Deadhouse, which is a total trip because, that was many, many years ago. But for her, it seems like only a couple of days has passed. So time obviously operates differently inside the Azath as well. But he basically brought her there after Hood was done using her after the chaining and that they broke off their relationship and all of that stuff. And then it kind of wraps up with us finding out that Moby's really been the one like protecting Fiddler, Crocus, and Apsalar through the desert this whole time and just kind of like tracking them through. And all those times when they were hearing just major Soul Taken Endeavor scraps, it was Moby kind of getting in and wrecking shop on people who might otherwise have threatened him. And then we go back to the Chain of Dogs, and Diker is there, gets summoned by Coltane because he wants a rundown of these tribes who live on the plains right outside of Erin, because he wants to see like if they'll honor their kind of treaties with the Empire and let them pass through, because he's putting Diker in charge of the refugee train and having them push on to the city while him and the Seventh and the Wiccans and the Redblades and all of that stuff turn and make a last ditch effort to kind of give them a last defense so that they can make it to the city. This is all happening 3 days after the Kundril had saved their bacon, and they're just on their last legs, and so they're going to turn and make a last stand while Diker and the refugees push on. He tells, Diker to make sure that the Empress never forgets this and doesn't forget the soldiers and the sacrifice that they made. List decides to stay back too, because he says that he found his war. And, yeah.
No! God, please, no! No!
And then we get their path across the plains of Erin, right? And we see that the soldiers gave away all their annual pay, not just their pay, but the whole army, like a full strength, full complements army salaries for a year. The Wiccans donated all of their stuff to the tribe's individual wealth as well. And these tribes outside of Erin are like, whoa, that's way too much money. We can't accept that. And they're like, well, we're not going to carry it, so you can keep it. And they're like, all right, fine. Well, what we're going to do then is use all the balance residual money to provide you escort all the way up to right outside of the city, or up to the road outside of the city. We're going to sell you all the supplies that you need, etc. And these tribes are just like dumbstruck, like, why are you doing this? And they're like, because the army really wants these refugees and they're willing to spend whatever, they got. And so again, just the feels, again, for this ungrateful set of nobles in particular. The nobles actually want to charge ahead. They don't want to take the escort with the rest of the refugees. They paid extra money to get carriages to take them right to the city. Diker says, now you're going to go with everybody else. I think Polikalar challenges him to a duel, and Diker just whips out his sword and straight up blasts him in the face, knocks him on his ass.
Yes! That's awesome!
But they rush all the refugees to the city. They do get them all inside, and Diker is greeted by Keneb inside, who says, look, you got to go report to Pormqual. But he also apologizes and goes, look, all of these soldiers here are so bitter that we couldn't come out to save you. If it was up to us, we totally would have done it. But they freaking made it, right? They freaking did it after all of this, after all the crazy battles, right? All of the challenges, succeeding against all odds, the river crossings, having your motives questioned, having the people you were guarding actually hate you and question you at every step and try and undermine you. You still put it all on the line, put all of your money, all of your blood, your sweat, your life, and you freaking did it and get it done. And they get into the city. Then we get Apt in the Shadow Realm, right? And she's there with her kid. Cotillion shows up, and he kind of gets filled in on the whole backstory. Actually, he says, look, you jacked him up by making him both, neither human nor Aptorian. And she's like, no, but I made him of shadow now. And he gets kind of like the whole backstory of what happened to all the kids on Aaron Road from Corbolo Dom, and Cotillion tells him all about bullies and stuff like that. But ultimately, Apt is kind of asking to be able to start like recruiting agents of Shadow who can help do some of the stuff that she was, and like kind of facilitate or visit Shadow's will on the world by like intervening directly. And Cotillion says he'll think about it. He also says that like seeing her, and he thought he wasn't gonna like have human emotion anymore after ascending and whatever, and he's like seeing Apt and Panic, and seeing Callum be so impacted and stuff like that. Just he feels even more empathy now that he's a god than he did when he was a human. And I just think that's like an interesting theme throughout the books as well. And then it ends with Callum arriving in Malaz City. He's still all discombobulated. Salkalan shows up next to him at the railing when they're anchored out in the harbor, and basically reveals himself to be Pearl of the Claw, who we saw earlier in the books. And so him and Lostara Yil have been tracking Callum all along, and he basically stabs him in the side and chucks him over for 3 hands of the Claw to finish off. He tells him, look, you're such an idiot, and the Claw's pissed because you abandoned us. We also know that you're here to assassinate Lacine, and that's just not going to happen. And so the Claw are going to take you out. And so I'm going to injure you by stabbing you in the side right now and throwing you in. And then the rest are going to wipe you out. He also says, look, you're such an idiot because like if you would have stayed with us, you easily could have been like the leader of the Claw. Like that's how big of a badass you are and how everyone looks up to you. But yeah, you blew it. Then Pearl tries to 86 the whole captain and crew, but Apt and Panic show up to try and defend Callum, who's already gone, obviously, but they're not going to let him just take out the captain and crew. Pearl busts out this Kenrala demon and unleashes it, and that keeps Apt really busy. The captain comes to, and he's like back to his normal self now that Pearl's gone. All of his kind of confusion and all that is gone, and so he leads the abandoned ship as Apt and this Kenrala demon destroy the boat, and it kind of fades out. Then we go over to the ship that was following them the whole time, and that is the one from Pormqual's treasury, or that was following his loot in with his household staff. And Manala straight up takes Callum's horse and goes, I gotta go with, and straight up jumps over to follow. Whew. So a lot happens in just these 2 chapters. I was going to try and do just 2 more episodes and do 3 chapters per, but there's just so much that happened. But this is where we're going to leave the regular stuff. So if you haven't read the rest of this book or the other books, then maybe you want to jump out now so that I can get into all that spoilery goodness. So there was a lot to talk about in this one. We have the beginning again of the Bridge Burners Ascension with Mappo working out what the shell exactly was doing, and that was again one of the first steps of them actually ascending. And then they need the blessing later from Ganos and Memories of Ice, and then for Hood to obviously turn over the keys. But getting the breadcrumb trail going now all the way up to that final conclusion. The other thing, and maybe I missed this or I don't remember it or whatever, but I totally was not connecting the dots on the Dujek sham outlawing ploy becoming clear until much later in Memories of Ice, whereas Diker was able to kind of work it out and connect the dots in Deadhouse Gates. I guess maybe just because I didn't know what I was looking for when I was reading it the first time, but there I was like, man, this seems pretty obvious. And then we also kind of just as a fun little one, we get Diker's kind of life in Darujistan foreshadowed when he links up with that Karpalin Desmond dude from the Trigil Trade Guild and says how he wants to hook up with that dude again in the future. And you just kind of get those little ties back to Darujistan already getting laid. Also, just like, how the hell can you not like Malazan characters, right? Like Lull, List. They don't talk a lot. Coltaine, right? We don't ever hear much from Coltaine or see him talk or see his thoughts or anything, but through Diker's eyes, you really get a great sense of who Lull is, of who List is, of who Coltaine is, what Bolt is all about. And so, again, there's not a lot of exposition on the page, but you get the characters through the view of other people's eyes. And for me, that's bomb. Again, I'm not a technical judge of how you're supposed to write characters, but it's enjoyable, and I still feel a deep connection to Coltaine, to Lull, to List, to Diker. Also, who the heck was speaking to Moby through that suit of armor at the end? Is that the Azath house? Is that Tremorlor itself actually speaking to Moby through that suit of armor? In which case, then it must mean that the Azath are more sentient than we thought, right? They're not just in some fifth dimensional plane making chess moves or whatever. They're actually like able to intervene directly to the extent of like having conversations. And what about that letter from the nameless soldier, right? Which I forgot to mention in the main video, but Diker gets that. Ugh. Also, just like, how big of a dick is Erickson, right? He gives you like all of the strife and conflict, and then he gives you like some of the ups, the coming together, the succeeding against all the odds, the putting each other first, the dignity of, even in the face of, ingrates and no thankfulness or anything, or no respect, they do the right thing. Again, just all of that dignity and succeeding. And then he gives you this kind of glimmer of light in chapter 20 where all the refugees finally make it and it's all been worth it. But then literally in like the very next chapter, 21, you're going to get Coltaine and Squint. You're going to get Diker and the 7th Army, out on the Aaron Road with Pormqual. You're going to get Malik Rel double-crossing and killing everybody. You're going to get Truth with Stormy and Gessler and Roach all dead. And so, again, just like this one tiny sliver of like, yes, it's all finally been worth it, this like cathartic thing. And then pretty much throughout the rest of the 4 chapters, you just continue to get the carpet ripped out from under you. Yeah. Such a dick. Just rip your heart out of your chest, throw it on the ground, and then jump up and down on it about 5 million times. And then just the last one is that on that boat with the Kinrala demon, they almost say Cartheron Crust's name. Pallet goes, "Oh, it's good to see you, Carth," and he gets shushed. And then they all jump overboard, but we should have seen it all the way back then. He's like, "Dude, I'm supposed to be dead. I was supposed to have drowned like months ago." And so again, just more dots that were there to be connected the first time around that totally missed even on the second time too. So a lot of cool stuff happening. I'm super excited to finish off this book. I've got a super fun casting video coming up, so make sure you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on those notifications so that you never miss one. Join the Discord, buy some merch, become a channel member. I have one already, but that's super fun. Then you get to use the emojis in the live stream, which I'll have to do another one soon. So we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy reading.